So hi, my name is Shawn Shafner. It's so wonderful to be with you all. From the movie!
I thought so. I recognized you.
Royal greatness. Yeah, I always like to... This is always one of my favorite parts during the talkbacks is to be like, I'm the constipated one. And this is a perfect beginning. I'll be our moderator for our panel, and I like to let our panelists introduce themselves because I think they're much better at it than I would be. But I'll start by introducing myself in case you came in a little late. My name is Shawn Shafner. I'm the founder of the People's Own Organic Power Project, or the POOP Project, and we make arts and education to stimulate creative conversation about sustainable sanitation for the person, planet, and world community. Essentially, we try to normalize the do everyone does with our art events. We are one of the executive producers on the documentary you just saw, had a podcast for many years called Shit and Shame with Shawn. I do solo shows across the country and the world, and I have a new book called Know Your Shit that's available now. And we co-produced this event along with Julia Cavici from the Rich Earth Institute. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next panelist.
Hey folks, I'm Jamina Shupack, and I'm also with the Rich Earth Institute. I'm a research assistant and an internship coordinator over there. And so, as the video said, and I think a lot of you are aware of the work that we do in the area, which is awesome, is that we are turning human urine into fertilizer. And we're engaging in that in multiple ways, through education, through technological innovation, and then through actually doing it because of a lot of people like you bringing us your urine, pasteurizing it, putting it on farms, and then also through like the legislation and permitting process, we're also moving that forward. So there's a lot happening over there. If you're not already on our newsletter and know what's happening, I recommend it. And pass it along. And we've done so much since that movie. It's so fun to see sort of where we were when that was filmed and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll come back.
I'm Christina Adams. I work for Resource Management, also known as RMI. We're a residuals management company. So we basically manage POOP biosolids. We manage SIA, hydrosolids, paper fiber, and wood ash. The company was started about 25 years ago, and we manage yearly 300,000 yards of residuals every year. And all land applied, no landfills. So it's all land application, going to farms, reclamation projects, landfill closures. I manage 35,000 tons of paper fiber every year. And I also manage about 10,000 tons of biosolids and compost, and all of my projects are industrial. I do some farm work, it's mostly industrial, so I work on reclamation sites, landfill projects, and so I'm actually in the trenches, so I'm in the field with people on gravel pits and landfills, and it's a great industry. It's really fun. We also do a lot with the treatment facilities, the wastewater treatment facilities. And I have a funny picture of my friend Josh, who was cleaning out one of the grit pipes yesterday that got clogged, and he had a line of septic trucks like waiting to get in. It's just stuff like that. It's like,
It never stops.
it never stops.
The creme de la crap. Thank you, Christina.
My name is Janine-Burke Wells. I'm the executive director of the Northeast Biosolids and Residuals Association. I work with folks like Christina to promote environmentally beneficial reuse projects like that. And I come from a little state as well, Rhode Island. That's where I'm up from today. And earlier in my career, I'm an engineer by training, and I worked for the EPA for 10 years, and then I ran treatment facilities for 20 years. So, like I said, I know it never stops flowing and it has to get managed, and we could do a lot better. I do agree with the movie when it comes to that.
Thank you. Well, and I think I just want to honor, we have a lot of wisdom in this room. I know there are farmers and town planners and lots of folks who are coming in. So even though the panelists, the experts are supposedly on this side, I just want to bring that barrier down and really invite the wisdom of this room to step forward, and there will be time for questions. But I'll plan to let us out of here by 4. So you started to talk about the film a little bit, Janine, and maybe we could just reflect together on how what the film shows reflects the reality on the ground. Both if you want to, pitch in for sort of a national perspective, if there's other places that you want to compare, but also really specifically for those of us who are coming in from, Brattleboro and the surrounding area, right? Like, is what we saw in the movie what folks like here might experience if they were to travel down their toilets in a magical journey?
So in Vermont, I mean, we've got 94 wastewater treatment facilities, and we have 680,000 people in the state of Vermont. But there are 340 people on septic systems in Vermont. So not
like 60%.
Yeah, on septic. So not all of it goes directly into the wastewater treatment facility. It has to be trucked into the wastewater treatment facility. But that's a big problem in this state because not everyone accepts sewage. The waste, from the when it gets pumped out, So
in the whole part of the movie where they were driving to Pennsylvania, you were taking the same trip as your poop. Yeah, that's not sustainable, is it? It needs to be done closer to where it's generated.
But would you say, does that reflect what happens?
Oh, that's absolutely what we're doing now.
Even in the state, even though we have approval for Class A biosolid, which is it's considered like an exceptional quality. It has to meet certain vector attraction and certain things have to be done to the biosolid in order to use it on land, okay? We still truck, I would say probably 55% of our biosolids out of state goes to New York.
Maybe even a little bit
You're
more.
sending yours to New York.
Yes.
And we're sending ours to
Takes
Pennsylvania.
about 50 or 60% of your solids right now.
What would you say that again, Janine?
Well, 50 or 60% of the solids end up eventually in New York being processed.
Yeah.
Because it can't happen.
So, I'm just curious, show of hands, if Vermont's biosolids were available to you to go purchase at the hardware store, as there are cities that do this, right? Milorganite out of Milwaukee, I think they've been making an organic fertilizer for 100 years.
Yeah.
DC, where I'm currently based, has a product called Bloom that they produce that's a Class A high-grade biosolid. But just curious, for those of you who maybe have farms or lawns, if you could go to the hardware store and buy the recycled biosolids that your town produces, would you do it? Show of hands, who would?
You're talking about, I'm sorry, I always do this.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. And it's a
Compost. Are you talking about compost?
It would be composted, pre-treated.
Right, thank you.
Yes. There are treatment facilities in Vermont that compost the sludge into a biosolid. So they'll do it with like wood ash or a wood chip to bring it to temperature, and it looks just like dirt.
It's free of pathogens. And Christina, would you agree? If you saw what it does, like if you take it out in the field, especially degraded soil,
It's incredible.
It's unbelievable.
Well,
how much it makes.
Yeah, and in Vermont we have really sandy soil, so the nitrogen helps bring the pH up and the organic level, and it really is a nice amendment. And we have a lot of farmers that use it for their silage, their hay fields. We don't really get into residential. We're more commercial, at what we do because our trucks carry 30 tons.
Right.
So if somebody said they wanted it for their yard, we'd be like, really? Do you have
A big yard.
Do you have a big yard? Because we got a lot of poop on that truck.
Right. But there is, I think that's one of the tricks with DC or Milwaukee is they have enough people who are local who can buy it, but then they also don't need to spend a ton of finances to store all of those biosolids before they go off the shelves. And I think one of the downfalls of the film, makes for good drama, but is we don't actually get to see those biosolids come into the plant, get treated, get turned into a fertilizer that is perfectly pathogen free. I think the question about safety, though, is still one that pops up. Jamina, did you have something you wanted to add before?
Well, I think there's an interesting space between compost is going to come from a biosolids treatment center versus maybe biosolids that are rerouted and not gone through the wastewater treatment plant, or not gone through the sewage system. So something that we are interested in is can we not flush it first, and can we just like compost it here without it being combined with industrial waste or everything else that goes down the sewage, which it talked a lot about in the film about
In Portland,
in Portland and here, and sort of what happens once it combines with everything versus can we just be dealing with the excrement, and is that a different story?
Right. So I think this is where we go next, is really like, I think part of the challenge that this issue is like digging into in a sticky way is I feel like the people who are gathered here, and they're probably about, 50-60% who maybe said that they would consider using biosolids on their ground, we understand that there is, we heard the term in the film, beneficial reuse, right? Which is like a fancy term that means let's put those nutrients that came from the ground and went into our bodies, let's put them back into the ground. Let's keep them cycling through. The challenge of this is, right, if you just have a bucket of poo, like we saw in Portland, which I've gotten to use those toilets, let me tell you. We met in Portland. Ole, who you see in the film, has, first of all the best colored pants. He's wearing green in the film, he would like pink pants, etc. But I remember he like gives me this bucket, one bucket for the poo, and one bucket for the wood chips. And he says, you just poo and then take a handful of wood chips and just smush it down. And I remember, I was like, I'm pretty comfortable with this stuff, but this is a new level, So we'll bookmark that for usability, right? And just like, what are the actual systems that people would want to use to do this? But in Ole's system, anything that came into my body is going to wind up in that bucket and eventually on the ground. And that could include already things that some people might feel contentious about, like pharmaceuticals. But once we put that into the sewer system, right now we've got our shampoo and our soaps and our Drano, and depending on your sewer system, the litter from the sidewalk that's pouring in there. And now we have a much more complicated slurry to deal with. So I think we kind of saw it in the film. There's a very stark comparison, right? Is it toxic sludge or is it biosolids? So maybe, Jamina, do you want to start? And then I'm also curious to hear sort of a little bit about where we are now in this debate, but also the history of it, if you all know something about that. Do you want to start us off, though?
Well, I think like overall, I think we're in an interesting moment where I think our systems were built for a different problem than we have. I think that the number of chemicals that we're sending down the drain, what we're asking our systems to do is inappropriate, in my opinion. And it looks like I have some nods.
No, these systems weren't designed to
They weren't designed to do that.
pharmaceuticals, PFAS, microplastics, all these new pollutants that we're seeing.
And so it's understandable we have this problem. Go ahead.
It all ends up in the solids.
It ends up in the what?
It all ends up in the solids. The treatment
In the
facilities
solids.
themselves can take it out of the water, but then it usually tends to end up in the solids where it becomes a problem to manage.
So it just makes sense to me
Right,
that we're at a moment where we have to
Yeah, so-
revisit that.
Yeah, so when all of it's separated, right, it ends up in the solids. And a lot of these facilities were built a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, Brattleboro was built in, 1950, I think,
It
or
was
something.
one of the first
One of the first ones,
Really?
yeah. And if you ever go there, they have like a diagram of like how it was built and, what the...
You should visit it too if you've never gone.
It's great.
It's really
It's great.
The
Brattleboro
Brattleboro
wastewater treatment.
We actually filmed
Connecticut
it
River.
for the documentary, and the footage didn't make it in.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway. So.
They're nice, they're really nice.
They're nice. We'll organize a group trip following this. We're going to march down with pitchforks.
It's
Close.
too.
It's close.
Got
Yeah.
coming soon, right?
Yeah, Steve, you got a question?
So, are you saying that there is a way to separate it, or that biological shit and piss has to stay separated from the beginning? They would have to be two separate systems so that all the things that you don't want to mix in never get mixed in? Or are you saying it is possible to separate them if you have the right equipment?
What do you think?
I mean, I've seen separate systems. University of Rhode Island has a whole plumbing system set up to separate urine and poop.
Wow.
But the poop still needs to go, it still needs to get treated at some point, unless they have a Rich Earth Institute that's collecting. I don't know what they're doing.
Well, yeah, because it has to be biologically treated.
Yeah.
But how safe broadly are biosolids? Like, I think how much, I mean, how up to speed is a lot of this processing? You know, I mean, you feel confident to sell it to people and spread it on their lands, right? But where can you tell us more about the circumstances?
Well, I mean, the testing that is involved is rigorous. I mean, we have to test, I think, our biosolids. I can't remember what it is. I don't know because I don't do the testing, but it's rigorous. I mean, and they test for everything. I mean, nowadays, everything. And PFAS was, you know, the ladder of
Does everyone know what PFAS?
You want to?
And polyfluoroalkyl substances, they've been around since the 50s. It's Teflon materials, Gore-Tex, anything that repels water.
Scotch Guard is in a lot of firefighting foam.
It's everywhere. It's in the soil in Vermont, background levels, it's everywhere.
When we say it's I've only recently become aware of this topic, and actually it's because our neighbor here in Vermont, Maine, recently outlawed placing biosolids for beneficial reuse on land because of PFAS contamination. And the real sticky thing about PFAS, PFOS, PFOA, these are all the same class of non-stick chemicals, is they are what scientists call forever chemicals. Right. They're form bonds that are very hard to break, and they're in our blood. I mean, I can say confidently, everyone sitting here, it's in our blood right now because these chemicals are so persistent. Yes. But I think what this all points to that's such a sticky problem is that I bet a lot of us would agree we want to see our nutrients get reused. We don't want to see them landfilled or incinerated where those PFAS just go into the air, right? We want those nutrients to be recycled. And we don't necessarily want these bad chemicals, heavy metals, things like that all go into the sewer system going onto the soil or getting other places. So that's it's just a tricky spot. There's not a great answer to it.
You're lucky here in Vermont, though. I don't think you have a lot of industry that uses it. So it's just really residential uses. And they're really, other than Bennington, where there was an industrial source. You know, and that's the thing you would want. You wouldn't want to use biosolids from a facility that has industrial inputs. That's what happened in Maine. That's what happened. The paper mills in Maine.
Say more about what happened in Maine.
Sure. Yeah. So in this one particular case that I know of, Kennebec Sanitary District, half of their flow back, this is 20 years ago now. They haven't been doing this for 20 years. This is a historic land application site. They had 50% of their flow was a company called Hutamaki, which basically makes China plates with a coating on it. So those were majorly contaminated solids that were land applied at the time, not knowing what PFAS was, not knowing anything like that. And it's the paper mills, it's a paper business in Maine that's really done that. These are industrially impacted,
yes.
Not run-of-the-mill.
Not every single farm in Maine has been contaminated. And the problem they have in Maine right now is that they put the cart before the horse. So I work with a lot of treatment facilities in Maine. We give them wood ash for their biosolids to compost, and they're all calling me like, well, I don't know what my plan is because I don't have a plan because I don't know where it's going to go. We can't landfill it. We don't have incineration. It looks like we may be going to, we don't know how far we're going to have to truck it. And so what happens then is the people paying for these bills, their bills are going to skyrocket. They're going to pay so much more money for water and wastewater.
If I could just take a step back. So there's basically 3 ways we have right now for managing these materials. We can incinerate them, we can landfill them, and then we can reuse them. We can treat them and reuse them. We need 4 or 5 more ways would be great to have, to diversify. But in Maine, they're down to one option, which is landfilling, which you put these organic materials in a landfill and they generate methane, which is like 25 times more powerful than just regular CO2. And it's not a sustainable sanitation solution.
Go ahead.
Well, it's a shame in Maine because, wasn't it like 70% of their biosolids were land applied?
And now it's 70% landfilled.
Right.
Wow.
They've gone from one extreme to the other.
Right.
Jamina, did you?
Yeah, I kind of want to just connect sort of your question and what you were just mentioning there, which is that we need more options.
Yeah.
And I think your question was sort of like, can we do this or can we do
New
this?
technology.
And I think the answer is like, we need to figure out ways of doing it all safely. I don't really foresee a future where we're going to have, neighborhoods all composting their own feces. That's like a dreamy space, and of course it does happen in Portland, and like it happens in interesting pockets. And so I think I get excited about having those sort of more grassroots options, which we luckily have here in Brattleboro, but then also continuing to develop solutions that are going to be on a bigger city scale because we have them and we need them. And so I think the answer to your question is yes, and.
And I just want to add, like, bad shit in, bad shit out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's scary about actually that story you told is like those, whatever that PFAS containing stuff, those were plates, right? Before they became ash, like that was something people were eating off of, you know? And so for me, a lot of what has really sparked my interest is I met Christina's boss, Sheila, at this national water policy event in DC. And the EPA stood up there and they said, we're about to pass some regulations around PFAS, which just came out on Wednesday, actually, some of them, that basically said, on Wednesday, they said, if you can detect PFAS in water, then in drinking water, then there's already too much of it, right? That the only safe level is an undetectable level of PFAS. But the problem is, these things have been in our systems already for like 70 years. And so Sheila took the mic and from RMI and she said, you know, I hear you saying what we're supposed to do, but like I literally, we have this ban in Maine right now and I have trucks of biosolids. What do you want me to do with them? Do you want me to drive them to Canada? Do you want us to make this Canada's problem? Do you want us to take them to Alabama? Is that what you think we should do? And again, this is for me as like an artist, as a thinker, it's what makes this such a sticky issue. Because if we're gonna have cities, we're gonna have people living together, we need urban systems. We all, like, as problematic as these systems are that we saw, they're also total modern miracles that have enabled all of our lives to exist. And we can't just leapfrog. There is we have to figure out the pathway to build on what we have now to get to where we're going, envisioning some of that.
The bureaucracy piece is the one that gets like really, really I think so.
We're both on Green Mountain Water's board.
Yeah.
You know, we are on the political side. We're on the Government Affairs Committee and Residuals Committee, and you know, we're pretty much at the heart of what's going on. But yeah,
That's pretty exciting to hear about. I mean, just my perspective, the reason I get so excited about shit is that all the resources are there to recover. So think about what's in there and what you can take out as part of your new process. So there's nutrients, obviously, phosphorus and nitrogen, but there's energy. You can generate biogas. You can create bio-oil with some of these things. What else? Carbon dioxide is another product. You can ammonia, fertilizer. There's so many possibilities of things you can recover. So think if you try and start at the end and work back, maybe you may find some technologies that you want to further look into, but think about it as a resource.
No, that wasn't to raise it over.
We should keep talking, and I just want to say, like, we're working on a legislative bill right now with Rich Earth to be able to actually legally do that in a bigger way that doesn't currently exist in Vermont. That's actually not really legal right now, but we're working on it. So we should keep talking. That's all.
And I think for me, it speaks to the combination of technologies. Like the first thing I would say is just make sure whatever you're doing is safe. You know, that because the reason that toilets and sanitary systems are so important is because they prevent the spread of communicable diseases. And so any system needs to respect that and those sort of rules of like Jack Sim, the World Toilet Organization, likes to say about poop, it's like fire. It'll cook your food. It will also burn your house down. So we have to find that balance of respect, and that's some of where the strong codes that we have now came from, is that fear and the Victorian era and the sort of development of sewer systems. I think where we're looking now is like, now that we understand the science, we can be a lot more specific with how we apply it and not sort of take a jackhammer but use more of a chisel, and that the system is a really important part. Whatever the future is, it needs to be something that all of us, or the 600 people in your community, are willing to use and can be used easily, right? Like some of what we saw at the end of the film with things that are happening on a global scale with the 2.3 billion people who still don't have access to toilets, is you can't just go into especially if you're not from that country, just land in someone's country and drop a latrine and say, you're welcome, because they don't want that. Because they have a TV now and they see that people have flush toilets and they want flush toilets too. So unless you have a community of people who are, which in this room we might, who are really ready and gung-ho and are I can't wait to shit in a bucket, that can work. But for so much of the world, the only way that a compost system is ever gonna beat out a flush toilet is if it's so well designed, if it looks so beautiful, if it's so well integrated that you don't even notice you're using it, or it's even better, right? And I think maybe with that systems question, I do want to go back to you, Jamina, and say we saw Rich Earth in 2014 when the Flush crew was here filming, but I think you all have really figured out that community impact side of things and how to engage. So can you talk a little bit about where Rich Earth is now, how many people are being served, what the next steps are?
Yeah, I'll say a few things, and I just want to recognize there's a number of Rich Earthers in the room, so if I miss something, I ask that you speak up. And so, in a big way, we've just sort of grown in a lot of different directions. And so we're collecting more urine than we were in the film. We collected over 12,000 gallons last year from over 200 donors. We're opening up a new depot for people to bring urine to. That's going to be up in Rockingham.
A second location.
Cool. That will pick up and pasteurize. We're putting more urine on more land. There's a lot of farmers who are interested. We actually don't even have enough urine to meet the demand of farmers that are out there. With fertilizer prices spiking right now, we're getting a lot of questions, not just from local folks, but from all over the world, to be honest. A lot in the States, but all over the world. We have a urine diversion, it's the Rich Earth Summit that happens in the fall, and that started off in Kim was in the video, Kim and Abe were chatting in her living room at the very beginning for the summit, and now it's a global event, and it's offered either online, or this year it might have a little bit of both, and we have over 23 countries that are coming to that, which is really exciting. And then every year we're doing more and more research and doing more and more educational outreach, and so we always have multiple research projects happening, one that we're sort of wrapping up, one that we're starting, and one that we're applying to next. And so we're doing research on pharmaceuticals, we're doing research on biosolids, on biochar biosolids, we're doing research on different ways of putting urine on land, different application methods, and in all of those technological research studies, we always have a social research element. You were saying a moment ago, Shawn, that you can't just be like, here's a technology, have a nice day, bye. You have to actually know what people are thinking and if they're going to engage with it. And so we always have a social research element incorporated into our research. And then of course we're always working to sort of make it easier to get permits potentially. We're always working on new permits and working with the legislator from the legislative place because we're doing things that we're asking them to permit things that they haven't been asked before, and so we're trying to make that possible. There's a company called Wasted who wants to be doing portable toilets, composting portable toilets up in Burlington. And they actually moved to Vermont because we're here, so that they could have access to our knowledge as an organization. What was I going to say?
Permitting pathway
For
Wasted.
I lost my train of thought.
Good, I'm glad it's not just me.
I totally lost my train of thought.
Brightwater Tools.
Say again?
Brightwater Tools.
Brightwater. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Compost toilets. Anyway, so they're trying to get through the permitting process, and they're using the fact that we've been able to try to like at least get theirs here, but it's not easy because we're the first in the field. And then another really exciting thing is that a tools branch came off of Rich Earth 2 years ago, I want to say, called Brightwater Tools, and we're making equipment to be able to deal with sanitation on site. And right now it's largely geared towards businesses, like business buildings or like not really one person homes, but like a complex of some kind to be able to manage all the waste on site with some of the technology that we've been using for our waste here in Brattleboro, but to be able to get that out beyond our borders.
And that's huge if you have 60% of people on septic systems. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's good for you.
So there's some really exciting things happening, and I'm going to just point out to my people if I missed something that you want to make sure I mention.
Yeah, well, maybe just to take a moment to clarify the regulatory thing, which is that in Vermont, you can have a composting toilet, right? But there are two like big butts that go along with that. Or normal size.
I like big butts.
So they are that, one, you're still required to have a septic system and a leach field, which can be 25% smaller, but still has to exist. And two, that you're not allowed to make compost with the compost from your composting toilet. You have to either bring it to a landfill or a wastewater treatment facility or apply for an expensive shallow burial permit. So we're working on changing both of those things. And we think that's important, like both just so people can do it legally and for people who are already doing it, and also because wastewater is one of the biggest barriers to smart growth in Vermont, because you can't fit more people in like climate smart, resilient town centers or villages because you don't have space for more septic systems and they don't have wastewater treatment plants. So having like ecological sanitation in those contexts would be a really important part of like climate resilient Vermont future. So that's a big kind of policy priority for us.
And I think some of the hope is that things are moving because they have to. You know, when you talk about these climate resilient cities, climate change causes sea level rise and wastewater treatment plants need a place to put their water out. So that means lots of wastewater treatment plants are in coastal zones that will be endangered from sea level rise, which means something is going to change, right? Like our availability to fresh water, our availability to fertilizer is shifting the conversation right now, you know?
That's why the New York Times reached out to us, because of the price of fertilizer.
So things are moving. I think what's exciting is like, you all are in one of these places where you're creating the technology so that it's ready for people when they want it. But maybe you also, and I know we just have about 10 minutes left, but could speak to where the more traditional wastewater resource recovery industry is headed. Like, what are you all hearing?
So there's two things. One is dryers. So a lot of the treatment facilities are drying their biosolids. So they have way less effluent, there's way less product in the end. So it's easier to manage, and usually is in like a pellet form. So if it is land applied, it's easier to spread. So that's one way, because you're reducing the amount of your end result is less biosolids. The other is pyrolysis.
Is what?
Pyrolysis.
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 Or gasification. They're actually solid waste technologies that now we're looking at in biosolids management. And they can still end up with some beneficial biochar as an end product, so biofuel you can generate. So yeah, the new technologies.
No, we don't, I mean, the pyrolysis, right.
It's pyro. Well, fire, it's fire.
Well, it's fire.
Really temperature.
Hot,
Yeah,
low
really
oxygen.
hot, really hot.
Does that also do biochar?
That's how biochar.
Yes, yes. So, but they're saying that can remove the PFAS because it's at such a high temperature. So those are like some of the things that wastewater treatment facilities are looking at.
I just want to mention another way of reducing the amount of solids is digestion.
Oh, right.
Anaerobic digestion, which can generate energy and really, I have one of our members, Greater Lawrence Sanitary District in Massachusetts, that's completely off the grid.
Wow.
He's not using any power from national grid right now.
Wow.
Because they have 4 digesters, they're mixing food waste in with it, and it's generating biogas enough to that they don't need power.
Well, we have the cow power program.
Cow power.
Cow power. So there are 20 farmers, I think, that have digesters, and they're putting, obviously they're from the cows and the manure, and then wood chips and whatever's on the farm, like whatever is there goes in the digester. And I know one of the digesters, like he's getting so much money back, but he's supplying like the whole town.
From his cow's poop.
For his cow's poop.
Wow.
Like it's crazy.
The potential's definitely there to be totally circular, sustainable,
That's
but
cool.
we're just not there.
I mean, I think to what you're saying before, Jamina, I was thinking about this social thing, right? Sewers came around at a time where people were still moving out of miasma theory, which
Yes.
meant that they believed that disease was caused from bad smells. And so what was the way to keep people healthy? It was to send the poo far away underground. And that's part of what made the proliferation of sewers instead of earth closets, instead of composting toilets. And we're in a different social time, right? Where the factors are different, we understand things differently, and we can re-engineer our settings. I know for me, like when the film was made, and the film came out in 2017, I think there's actually a shorter version, a 12-minute version I've been screening recently that says like, it's not all bad, it's not all good. I think this version comes a little more on the side of like, oh, there's something to be suspicious about. And I wish there was a moment in the film of like, but also let's give a round of applause for the engineers, the amazing science that has like, I remember touring this plant here, and you come in, and they're like, here's what we receive at the plant in Brattleboro, and here's what comes back out. And they're just, it's really miraculous, you know? But I think what's really shifted me over to be more positive, to want to work with municipal waste treatment, is that technology isn't going to disappear tomorrow. And it's the technology most people in this country rely on. And so how do we use those technologies as bridges to get us eventually where maybe we want to go? I think some of that is like co-generating, enabling more methane to come out of these spaces, and then at the same time diversifying, decentralizing, finding other ways to move forward. Jamina, you look like you've thought.
Oh, I honestly think that the goal is the same from our place, from the wastewater treatment plants. I think the goal is the same, to have healthy communities and if possible, to reuse the resource. So I actually think the underlying goal, we share.
Yeah.
Completely. And I have like deep appreciation for the technology that brought us to where we are, and now let's move forward.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes left. Any questions from our intelligent and intrepid audience?
Vermont has the universal recycling law. I mean, maybe someday part of that recycling law will be, our poop and our pee. Maybe someday, in addition to us composting our food waste, we compost it all.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Right?
Well, my impression
I
of
vote for
Vermont,
yes.
and I work
for yes.
I work with all the states, and I feel like Vermont, the culture there is you want to take care of your own shit.
Yeah.
So I have every confidence that you're going to figure it out.
I agree with you completely, and I hope that there's another room in the next building that is happening. That ambassador is happening also. I think both work has to be done. Yeah. We have to be having both of those conversations, and my understanding is that a lot of the PFAS chemicals are banned.
But they have a new chemical.
The two big ones, but they need the chemistry just changed.
Okay.
It's
So what's it called? K9?
Gen X.
Gen X.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to name it after my generation. Gen X.
It is a real, yes, thank you. And I think it's, again, part of what has brought me to be reinvigorated and excited about this issue, because the ban in Maine, is one effective way to say the buck stops here. Maybe there's PFAS in it, but it's not going on the land. I think, firstly, there's a question as to, because some of that contamination was industrial, it's like, is this ban actually going a little overkill? We don't yet have the EPA guidelines on what specifically PFAS in soil does. So there's questions still to be answered. But to your point, if we're going to stop it here, but we don't turn the tap off, then what have we actually done? So I'm excited to learn more about what are the next steps with the EPA. That's the place where I would suggest if this is an issue that's also invigorated you, there's a great documentary about PFAS, and the rules are coming down. So this is a really good time to actually get informed and talk to the EPA. I think my sense is from the place of wastewater treatment, you know, it's a huge industry that make these chemicals, and the wastewater sector doesn't really want to become those advocates because they don't see that it's their place. But I think there are lots of community organizations where it's like exactly a right time to begin to get involved and see what else to do. And just for time, I want to pause us there, but maybe just a last rundown of Chelsea Wald, in her book Lutopia, or her book Pipe Dreams, talks about Lutopia, and this idea that there is some perfect situation out there. So maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing either like what's your version of Lutopia, and or what can those of us who are assembled here today, what can we do to help push the needle a little bit to get us there?
Well, like I said, my vision of Utopia is complete resource recovery, circular economy. We're taking everything we can back, including putting carbon back in the ground, because carbon's really a big issue, climate change, obviously, right now. So Utopia would be, maybe, I don't know if we would have, in Utopia we would have decentralized systems that do all of this resource recovery locally, and but I think we're going to be stuck with the big systems for a while.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to see total beneficial use because it's, excuse me. Oh, sorry. It's important, you know,
To put
it's
that
important
stuff
to put it
back
back in the soil. You know,
Yeah.
it's important. The farmers use it and need it. And
Soils are bad.
yeah, I'd like to see that continue. I mean, I agree. I don't think that the wastewater treatment facilities are going to go anywhere anytime soon. So I think we need to just try to make them the best that they can be, whether that's drying or, you know, whatever technology comes along. But then comes the money, you know. It's very, 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 very expensive.
And the taxpayers fund that.
Correct.
Yeah, water rates pay for these
Yes.
improvements.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamina.
I agree with everything that you've said, that there's the full resource recovery. I share a bit of your dream up in the front, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, of these smaller communities being able to fully manage their own shit. And I think I want to add a layer of something that gets me really excited about being in this space is that I feel so much joy when I get to know that my resources are going back into the earth. I feel more connected to the earth. I feel more excited about being human, honestly, than when they're not. I feel like there's so many things that I do or that we do in this world that are detrimental to the earth, and this is one where like I eat and I make resources, I make nutrients that can go into the earth, and that's amazing and that's exciting. And so my Utopia is like that this is also an element of healing with how we see ourselves and our relationship with the earth, that we are part of it and that we can provide goodness back to the earth.
I love that, Jamina. Someone asked me earlier, what does your shirt mean? What does it mean to say I'm a pooper? And to me, it's about not saying I'm not just a consumer, right? And my value is not just about how much I buy. It's about also that I'm in a cyclical nature, and I consume, but I also create. I'm a creator, a producer. I'm a pooper, yes, it's true. So in just a moment, I will officially close us out, but I did want to show, I realized I had my chamber pot of goodies that I use sometimes, and if folks want to come up after, this is some vermicompost, this is worm poop that you could put into your garden, right? Which just shows us like, this is natural, we understand poop, beneficial poop for use, particularly when it's other animals. This little baby food jar has Milorganite in it. So if you've never smelled or seen municipal sewage transformed into a fertilizer you can buy in the hardware store, this is it. And this little jar has in it a dinosaur poop fossil called a coprolite. This fossil is 208 to 228 million years old. And what I love about this dinosaur poop fossil is it reminds us that change is inevitable. And if you think the systems cannot transform, they can and they will. It is the only way. And the best that we can hope to do is put ourselves in a place to create the most positive transformation as possible. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists, Jamina Shupack, Christina Adams, Janine-Burke Wells. I want to thank Julia Capucci, Ms. Stillman, Odell Bouchard from Uphill Inspired, and Shawn Shafner. Thanks everybody. Thanks so much.